So we are moving on to our next panel, Young, Gifted, and Latina panel, hosted by Kayla Marte. And Keyla, if you're there, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you this afternoon. And without further ado, we're going to get started on our Young, Gifted, and Latina panel. We have the amazing three individuals here. Brianna, who works as the Director of Organizing and Partnerships at Voto Latino Foundation. We have Ariana, who is the founder and CEO of DivySci, and Alexia, who's the digital content coordinator. So I want to give them a few minutes, and Brianna can start to just introduce yourselves and say who you are and what you're passionate about.
Awesome. Hey everyone, happy Friday the 13th. I hope it's been exciting for you all. It is such an honor to be here with such fierce mujeres who are, walking the walk and making things happen in our community. For those who I haven't had a chance to meet before, my name is Brianna Carman. I'm the Director of Organizing and Partnerships at Voto Latino. And my story and, what I'm passionate about, Keyla, really starts back about 5 years ago when I was an intern. I was a junior in college, had no idea what I wanted to do. All my friends were doing internships, so I thought I needed an internship. And I took one with my local member of Congress. And I loved it. I showed up way more than I should have, spent so much time at the office, felt like I worked there. And it really created an opportunity later on where I met the congressman and he let me know he was running for re-election for US Congress. And he was looking for someone from our community to be campaign manager for that race. And they asked if I would, consider applying. I did. I, again, hadn't even graduated at that point in time, but I later became a campaign manager. He won his race in 2016 and began running a historic US Senate race in 2018 in Texas. So really spent a lot of time building up infrastructure, learning things as I went on the job, trying to figure out, ask a bunch of questions as someone who was young, sometimes the only woman of color in those rooms. And it really brought me to this point where I realized that I wanted other people who look like us and who are from our backgrounds to have someone welcome them into this political arena like I was welcomed into. And I feel like the more diversity and the different experiences that we have, the better policy that gets created. So I worked on political campaigns and then later on decided to move to the nonprofit sector to really invite other individuals to get registered to vote, to learn how to advocate for themselves and their families and realize their political power. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis at Voto Latino.
Thank you so much for introducing yourself. Next, we'll go over to Ariana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ariana Abramson. I am a social entrepreneur. I'm a STEM advocate for underestimated youth, and I'm also a TEDx speaker. I'm the CEO and founder of DivySci software, and what my company is a software company that's looking to leverage machine learning and artificial intelligence to challenge biases that exist in the classroom, specifically around how do we teach Latina and Black girls mathematics and STEM. And I would say that my background really started being super nerdy and as a kid loving STEM and realizing that no one really looked like me growing up that were scientists or that were really competing in mathematics. And throughout my academic and professional journey, there were a lot of microaggressions that existed that could have taken me off track. And, that was really hard for me to start sharing my story with other people because of those internalized narratives of needing to be good enough. But when I was able to do so and found strength in my story, I began to realize that I wasn't alone. And in fact, many brilliant, talented women of color in STEM have been kind of taken off the trajectory or challenged because of the way they look and the spaces that they try to enter. So I've been on a mission with my team to help elevate these narratives and make sure that the next generation of STEM leaders and advocates and scientists and mathematicians start to look more like us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. And Alexia?
Hi everyone, my name is Alexia Constanza. I am the owner and founder of my clothing business called Supreme Pink and Green, and I also am a digital content coordinator. My beginnings in digital content coordination specifically really started in high school. I literally took one class on coding for all the coders out there, just HTML and CSS, and I picked up on it really quickly and I really enjoy it. So funny enough, I mean, 8+ years later now in my career, I'm able to use that on a more advanced level as I also create content, manage content, spearhead web design projects and more. And my business, Supreme Pink and Green, was actually started in the midst of a pandemic like many others. And the inspiration for that business actually came from my sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And for me, it was in clothing that's not only comfortable, but definitely reflects hypebeast styles, which are styles that I love, and being able to share that with my sorority sisters. But from that, in the midst of everything else that relevantly has been happening, especially what's been happening to people of color and Black people, I was able to incorporate systematic racial injustice issues within my clothing line as well. So for example, I did create a shirt that really symbolizes what's happening in a lot of cities such as Washington, D.C., which is gentrification. And so I was able to create that clothing specifically to shed light on those issues. So yes.
Thank you so much for sharing. And my name is Kayla Marte, and I'm honored to serve as the moderator for this conversation. And I have recently founded my LLC, which is Lifting While Climbing, and we help women of color run for office. Because if we have women who feel confident and equipped to run for office, we will have a more reflective and inclusive democracy. So that's what keeps me going. And I'm so excited to be here and connect with you all. Amazing individual. Walker's Legacy does not do anything half done. They come full blown and have created such an amazing day today with this summit. And so my first question will be, what are some of the challenges you face and how have you overcome them during your time? So we can start with Ariana and then Alexia will go next.
Yes, that's a great question. And I would say, you know, I'm an entrepreneur and I've been an entrepreneur for about 4 years. And prior to being an entrepreneur, after I graduated undergrad, I went the normal traditional route and decided to, you know, go into a Fortune 500 company. So my parents were really happy that I got my job out of college and go that traditional pathway that most, you know, Latino parents love. And, you know, within those spaces, I realized that I had to begin to conform and I had to, you know, really do and drive business that was for stakeholder goals. And, you know, when I decided to take that launch or that jump into entrepreneurship, it was really challenging. And I would say challenging because conversations around building businesses and intergenerational wealth were not conversations that I grew up having or conversations that my family were really having. And then if I mix in that and also the fact that being an entrepreneur makes you bring something else to the table that is not just, you know, a business suit. In fact, when you go into social entrepreneurship, you're also challenged to bring a part of yourself and your narrative to the story regarding the business that you want to build and the impact you want to create. And for me, being able to be comfortable with that and being comfortable in who I am and the space that I came from, and to realize that that is an asset instead of a deficit, because people that looked like me weren't actively in the same space I was looking to be in, challenged me a lot. But I would say when I found my space and where I found where I fit in and was able to grow, I came to terms with my narrative and I started sharing my story openly. And I was comfortable realizing that, you know what, I probably will be one of the few women of color that look like me, but that's okay. And knowing that that adds a different perspective that will change the face of technology.
Absolutely. Thank you. Alexia? We'll take 1 second. Yep, and we'll unmute you really quickly. It does that sometimes. And if you are able to, feel free to introduce yourself, all the attendees, drop your name, or if you have a business or what you're passionate about in the chat or comments, and definitely connect with one another. We see the comments as well, so we'll be reading them and any questions, but start with the introduction of where you're from and if you have a business or what you're passionate about. Okay, did they unmute you yet? Just give us another moment. There we go.
Thank you. So some of the challenges that I faced is just learning to trust the process. I know that's a cliche, but I think across the board for any professional who definitely wants to challenge themselves, it's just something that you have to learn to be comfortable with, even when you really are uncomfortable. I know for me, I've worked in so many different industries that I never thought I would enter, just to make sure that I'm en route to, again, those positions that I want to be in. And so that's still hard, even 5 or more years later into my career. I know, for example, when I first started interning, I was very spot on with what I wanted to do, which was definitely telling stories of Latinx, Black and Brown people. And so I was able to do so, I would say, at least 3 years into my college career. As soon as I graduated, you know, those jobs just weren't open yet. And so what did I do? Go back to doing admin work or anything that I could do in the meantime to keep my hustle going until I got to the next position that I wanted to be in. And so that's something that even today, in the midst of a pandemic and so many other situations that happen because life happens, that's something that is a challenge, but is not a challenge that is impossible to overcome. I would also say being self-motivated to increase your skill set whenever you can. I know initially I would take any and every volunteer opportunity to grow as a professional, especially in the realm of digital communications. And as I got older and got a little more comfortable in the positions that I was able to take with my profession, I realized that, hey, you know, you haven't done a course training in a long time. You haven't, you know, been up to date with what's going on in the digital communications world or the coding world. So staying motivated to do those things is definitely challenging when you feel like you just caught your breath and you're finally where you want to be, but it's still important. And then as an entrepreneur, I would say definitely just finding the resources to get things started. I myself taught myself graphic design through Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, and a lot more Adobe programs. So the design aspect for the clothing that I create, honestly, was pretty easy, but finding vendors, and I'm sure other people on this webinar could definitely relate, is extremely challenging, especially if you want, you know, your payback value. Like the initial presentation was demonstrating, we do invest in ourselves. We're literally our only investors. And so sometimes that's very challenging when, you know, you're not making your 100,000 or just your million. You feel comfortable enough to be dropping as much into yourself, but you realize how important it is to be your biggest investor, even if you are your only investor. And so just finding the resources to do things can be difficult, but again, just staying the course and knowing why you're there, keeping your purpose in mind, is something that's pretty important so you can beat those challenges.
Brianna? Same thing. We hopefully, yep.
Okay, I think we got it. Perfect. So, you know, I work in the space that's an intersection between politics, government, and advocacy. And I don't have to point out to everyone here, but that space and the people who tend to be in power and have been in power for hundreds of years usually look white. They're usually cisgender males and people who just don't look like me and don't come from places that we come from. And so that was really hard to start off with, where there were times where I would face, you know, microaggressions, and people would have different biases about you, whether unconscious or directly biased, because of the way you look, because of the way you dress, the way you speak. They would have biases about your skill set, or, you know, question if you deserve to be there. And I think sometimes we internalize that and start to doubt ourselves. And so really by being in this space and working at an organization like Voto Latino, I've been able to see, you know, so many young, passionate people who are wanting to, you know, inspire their communities and the people around them to help push and use our political system as a way to advocate for issues that are directly impacting our communities. And that what we've seen during coronavirus, right, where Latinas are heavily impacted by it, Latinx households, they've either had individuals lose a source of income or seen reduced income. So who better than the people who are directly impacted by it to be advocating and to be pushing for these issues? And it's really something that, you know, has fired me up and pushed through a lot of these hard times, especially hard elections, where realizing that by us being in these positions, it really creates doors and opens up other opportunities for people to see you in them and to think that they can do that or do something similar. So I would love for more people who look like us, more Latinas, to continue breaking glass ceilings and being in politics, advocacy, and in government spaces, because things don't change unless we're in those roles.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for each of you sharing. I heard a lot of great takeaways and staying resilient and being the one to be the one that creates the opportunity that you may not have, or taking advantage of an opportunity that's not always available. The wonderful sounds of living in New York City. So welcome Vanessa, who is the founder of Latina World Travel, and we see Susanna from California. Keep introducing yourselves. We really want to make this a conversation and really invite you all to ask questions as we go on. So my next few questions will be for each of you specifically, and I'm going to start with Alexia, and the question for you is, what was high school like for you? Please describe what led you to found the Latinas Club.
Sure. So high school for me was just very eye-opening, and it definitely established the ground that I was able to build my legacy as a Afro-Latina woman. I learned the importance of volunteering. I did go to a same-sex school that was actually Catholic, and part of the mission of the school is literally to instill giving and volunteering within the students. Usually that literally is through, you know, hey, you need X amount of hours to graduate. Now for some folks like myself, I'm like, you know, I understood, but once I got there and was making sandwiches for people who literally will only have that as their only meal. When I was able to interact with students who are from underrepresented communities within those moments, I realized, again, this is where I need to be because this is important, especially for our Black and Brown communities and Latinx communities. I learned how to be a team player there, especially I played sports. I was in AP and honors classes, and within those classes, you had to do your good old group work, but it showed me how powerful women are when they unify. And so that's something that I'm really grateful for. And it also taught me to fight for what I believe in, which is how I ended up founding the Seton Latinx Club specifically. But I would say that wasn't just an effort on my end solely. It was definitely a group effort. The Latinx community within that school increased every year that I was there. And so while there were other clubs that were represented or representative of different ethnic groups at that school, we did not have a Latinx club. And so myself and my peers definitely saw that as vital. And so we simply went to the head of the club and organizations at the school to get things started. I was turned down multiple times. I was even told we don't see that as an important organization at this school at the time. As my father would tell me multiple times, if you want something, go get it. So that is what I did. I went and spoke to that individual multiple times, again, showing how important it is. Finally, she budged and decided that a petition needed to be signed in order to make it happen. What I didn't know was my peers who I'd been discussing this with had already gone ahead of me and got that petition started, got all the signatures. So we were in business. That was my senior year of high school. We held fundraisers. We did volunteer projects. We also even made our own Seton Latinas shirts, you know, with I think it's like the foamy paint that you put on t-shirts. And it's crazy because 8 years later, they still stand strong. And their t-shirts are way cuter now, thank goodness. But it's just incredible to know that our heart and our legacy, me and my peers who were able to do so, it's still there, and it's there with a purpose. There's still a great group who not only educate the community about Latinx matters, but also go out into the communities that surround that school, which are underrepresented and low-income communities, and do good work. So.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that beautiful story, and that legacy piece is so important. Even though you're no longer there, it's still standing and it will continue. Brianna, how did you become the director in organizing or ends up in your position? Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Definitely. So I know I mentioned, right, I was an intern, managed a race for US Congress, worked on a Senate race, and really working in politics, again, it just reminded me how unique it was to be a young Latina in this space, where not a lot of people in positions of power or leadership look like you, understand where you're coming from. And there's this whole conversation, we saw it happen during the 2020 presidential election, of how to engage the Latinx voter, which is really funny because to me, it's like, how do we engage ourselves? It's not like an unknown science, where at the national level, that's what the conversation sounds like. And so really what I try to focus on day in, day out is engaging members of our community. Again, that whole idea of inviting someone to walk into this space, take up, and realize their political power and their ability to push and use these processes, these institutions, to make something better for themselves and their families. And so what we've been doing is registering individuals to vote. We were able to register over 600,000 people this year in a lot of important states like Texas, Arizona, Nevada, and Florida. And really, first registering those individuals and then walking them through the process of, getting educated on candidates and helping them think about what it looks like to show up for early voting, voting by mail, or showing up on election day. In addition to that, one of my favorite things at Voto Latino, which we built and which I oversee, is our volunteer program. So this idea of you being able to learn these skills using digital technology that a lot of other campaigns, whether it's local, state, or national, are using, and being able to get trained on that. So that way later on, our volunteers are able to, get jobs on campaigns, work in these spaces, and ideally create change that people like them will be in those positions later on. And that's, something that I really enjoy at Voto Latino. And this whole idea, to sum it up, is just making sure that people like us are having access to these opportunities, getting education that they need, and creating space so that way later on we see more people like us in these roles.
Absolutely. And specifically for Ariana, how do you assert yourself as a young professional Latina in the business landscape?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that it started when I was in my first semester of my master's program. I was sitting in a room full of students with my cohort. There was about 20 of us. And of course, I was like the youngest and the only Afro-Latina in the space. And we had speakers that were talking about their experiences or life experiences that led them to start businesses, to be entrepreneurs. And all the speakers were white male, and they did really well for themselves. And I sat in that room and I thought, why not me? And then when that epiphany hit me, my paradigm shifted. And what it really helped me to do and to realize was that, the confidence that we have seen others that don't look like us have when they're in business or leadership, should also be translated into how we move through the universe, right? This idea that as women of color and myself as an Afro-Latina, we need to know everything or be perfect to be able to speak up, to be business leaders, to be thought leaders is false. And I keep telling myself that, and why I continue to assert myself in that way is that I realized that people before me that have thought that they knew everything really started building ideas and building companies. And, we held ourselves back a lot of times by thinking that we need to be all or nothing. So when I constantly am thinking about building my business and elevating myself and my team, I reiterate the message that we deserve to be in this space, and that we have a right to be here. And in doing so, it helps us stay grounded, especially in times where it's hard and it's challenging. And, you know, we get through a lot of issues that may be, you know, specific to the fact that we are people of color in technology, but it helps us stay focused in doing so.
Thank you so much for sharing. So I want to ask each of you, in the organizations that you've worked with or come across, did you ever feel that you were ever treated like you were not as capable as your non-Latina counterparts? Or can you speak to that experience of just being, like you mentioned, the only one in the room? Or what was your experience like that? And if you ever encountered that? We'll start with Brianna this time and then go over to Alexia.
Sure. So there's this one event that, you know, after years, I still remember, where I had just become campaign manager, and I was asking our email and digital marketing firm, the owner of the company at the time, for, you know, the reports. I was new to the job. I wanted to see how well we were doing. And I had a hunch that we weren't doing well because we were spending more money on this firm than we were getting in. And so the owner just wrote me off as a young woman and was like, oh, it's something that you probably wouldn't understand, so let me just explain it to you. I am not going to send it to you. So I made it my mission to find all of these pieces of paper, go to one of my professors at the time and do some financial modeling to project how we would do having this firm on retainer throughout the contract. And much to my hunch, like, it was proved right that we were spending more money on them than we would ever make back. So I showed my findings in my report to the congressman, and he let me have the privilege of letting this company know we would no longer retain them and we no longer needed their services. So it was really me as a young individual. I was 21 at the time, hearing someone tell me that I wasn't smart enough and wouldn't understand, and really pushing back and saying, I understand well enough to know that this isn't serving us in the organization, and it's my role to tell you that this is no longer needed. So thank you very much and goodbye. And it was such an empowering moment, and it's something that I think about, where, you know, never let someone tell you that you don't understand or that you're not smart enough to be able to think critically about something. Usually those people are trying to push you down for a reason. And I think more women should definitely stand up and push back, especially, you know, trust your gut and trust your hunches.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. Alexia?
I would say one of the most important internships I've ever had, and not to say that they weren't all valuable, but just one that truly pushed me to my wits' end initially. My boss actually saw a lot in me that I could do more. At the time, I expressed to her that within myself, I was experiencing a lot, like, as we all do, we go through life and we face challenges. But one day she had a very critical discussion with me of how she thought I was doing so far. Now, mind you, I thought I was doing well, doing the best I can, but she really just thought I could do better. When I went and spoke to this day, one of my mentors and also one of my really good colleagues about it, he really expressed to me that I had gifts that she wasn't aware of when it came to digital communications and social media specifically, and that I really need to utilize those gifts and show her, you know, what I have to offer. And so I believe it was my last month of the internship, I actually went to her and made a social media campaign proposition, asked her, could she even be a part of some of the videos that we were doing, asked her for specific things that I needed without hesitation. And mind you, this is the first time I'm doing this within the beginnings of my career. So I was frightened. It was very frightening. But honestly, I just knew that, again, I needed to do what I needed to do to make sure that I could succeed and show who I really am as a professional. And so thankfully, it worked out so well. To this day, the social media platform that it now stands for that organization has grown tremendously, and I'm so happy for them that it has. And it showed me again that even though somebody can't see something about you that you know is true, it shouldn't deter you from making your light shine regardless. And so that's definitely something that I learned and that I really, really hold near and dear to me, because, again, I mean, as they would say, scared money doesn't make money, and you just can't be afraid to go out and do it. You cannot be afraid to go out and, take a risk. And that risk could literally be, again, just doing something that you've never done before, whether that be being assertive or trying to take a different direction, like Brianna was saying, within a project or your career that people might necessarily see the vision for. So.
Absolutely. As they said in the chat, period.
Yep.
Ariana?
I would say one of my most valuable lessons or challenges that I faced was realizing the value of us creating and building for ourselves and for our communities, and not needing external validation in the form of checks, in the form of investment from people who are not aligned with our goals or mission. And I say that to say, like I said, I've been in the entrepreneurship game for only 4 years. I consider myself, relatively new to the space. And in 2019, I was working in a venture capital firm, right, that was run by white men, of course. And part of my role was to think about opportunities that they could look to invest and diversify their portfolio. So, after research, of course, I'm a scientist. I was like, hey, there's such a great market opportunity to target, women of color in a space of healthcare. And we were looking at things like CBD and things like natural supplements that support wellness, right? And I did all this market research and talked to the panel of managing directors. And then they told me that women of color are not a large enough market to build products for and to invest in. And, you walk away from that and you're just angry and you're like saying all these things. And then it was funny, right? Because you start to question that instant, like, am I wrong? Did I really, maybe it isn't. And then 2 weeks later, Tia Mowry from Sister launched a line of beauty supplements for women of color, right? And then we talk about this, and that's a perfect example, the universe in their short timing of how, we don't need them to validate what we know. We don't need anyone to validate what we know. In fact, what we need to be able to continue to do is to build spaces of people that support us in times when we feel like we're not on the right trajectory, because it's hard and because we got to keep working. And with that, I continue to take that away and challenge myself every day, even when things are hard or I don't think that I'm getting the traction I need, to be able to say, I've lived this experience. I'm not alone, and I know what I'm building towards.
Thank you so much. So my last question and invitation, and I always like to end things with a call to action. I want us to take the next few seconds to say 3 to 5 words of advice to other young, gifted Latinas who are out there. And I want to invite the attendees to also post it on social media, tag @Walker's Legacy. And who knows, there may be a giveaway, there may not be, but 3 to 5 words of advice to other young women. So I'll go first so you all can think about it really quickly. And my 5 words would be, if not you, then who? And then take it away, Ariana or Brianna, if you're ready.
So what comes to mind, sorry, this explanation is more than 3 to 5 words. What I've been meditating on a lot is honor yourself, in the sense of honor yourself in every room that you go into. Don't sell yourself short. Don't sit and be quiet in meetings because you're afraid of speaking up and rocking the boat. Honor yourself, and at the end of the day, you'll never be disappointed in yourself.
Okay.
Ariana?
Yes, I would say the advice I have is live in your truth. Whatever your truth is, whatever you feel like it is, don't be afraid to live in it. And once you do, you'll find those that gravitate to you.
Alexia?
My advice would be, believe in your sauce. You know what you have to offer. You know what you're bringing to the table. Don't doubt yourself. Definitely just be your authentic and true self, and you'll succeed. You'll go from there. So
Thank you so much again, everyone, for participating in this panel, and feel free to post. And thank you again. We'll go into our break and then continue with the fireside chat. Have a great afternoon.